Welcome to the Center for Architecture. I'm Jesse Lazar. I'm Executive Director here at AIANY New York and the Center for Architecture, and happy Archtober. We're so pleased to have you here with us. There's lots and lots of stuff going on this month all over the city. We have over 100 partners through Archtober, so I hope you visit archtober.org and see what else is happening. But as always, we have a wonderful program for you here tonight at the Center for Architecture. Our Cocktails and Conversations series planned by the Architecture Dialogue Committee, to whom we're very thankful for the hard work on this. I also want to thank our sponsor for tonight, Existing Conditions. And now I'm going to ask our AIA New York President, Gregory Schweitzer, to come up, and he's going to introduce our next speaker, and then we'll get things going. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It is great to have the presence of Madam President in our house tonight. I am so, with our presidential wave, got it. Look, it is, like I said, such a special evening. And Kimberly, I want you to know how thrilled I am that you're here in our presence. Welcome back, welcome home. We're really looking forward to the conversation tonight. I'm especially curious to finding out what's in those things over there. Look, this is such a wonderful event that this committee has been putting on. It's really wonderful to see you all here. I know that we have folks from all over, a lot of the boroughs coming in, and we want you to feel welcome here as well. So if you've never been here before, welcome. At this point, I'd like to take the time to introduce Ms. Dale Cohen, and she'll take the program from this point. My role is just to introduce people. By the way, we should have you here every meeting so we can pack this room up a little bit. This is good. I really like this. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you, Gregory. Great news, I'm short enough to reach the mic. So, made for short people. So again, I wanted to thank the sponsor, Existing Conditions, and thank you, Gregory. And of course, thank you to my committee. This is our 13th year, although I am a later comer to it, in the last 4 or 5 years. First of all, I wanted to just thank everyone for coming, and second night of Rosh Hashanah apparently is a thing for some people, I've been informed. So I'm going to introduce Kimberly and Beatrice, our people who are speaking this evening. The first image you see on Kimberly Dowdell's LinkedIn profile, just behind her iconic photo, is the following quote from Toni Morrison. "As you enter a position of trust and power, dream a little before you think." I like to think that this provides a window into her leadership. We are living in truly transformational times, one of the most consequential moments in my lifetime, and I imagine for many in the audience. The field of architecture has been hesitant to evolve, though they have made meaningful strides in the past generations. When I attended undergraduate architecture school, the faculty was devoid of female and minority voices. My graduate program, there was only one female professor and no representations of color. The stark absence makes it all the more thrilling to witness Kimberly's role as the national president of the AIA. It feels like a genuine rupture in the status quo, a moment that resonates with the culmination of generations of advocacy. We recognize that while we celebrate this progress, the journey forward toward equity is far from complete. She is the 100th National AIA president, a groundbreaking figure as the first Black woman and the first millennial to hold this office. She previously served as the national president of NOMA and was a board member of the Architects Foundation. She also taught at my alma mater, my undergraduate alma mater, University of Michigan, which I only found out today. Tonight, Kimberly will share insights into the role of the AIA president, which actually I didn't know what they did. So spoiler alert, it involves a lot of travel, navigating both physical and conceptual landscapes. In this moment, I see a powerful alignment between Kimberly and Beatrice, who I invited to speak as her interlocutor, both of whom are committed to reshaping the conversation about architecture. Kimberly's focus is largely national, while Beatrice's is international. I met Beatrice during her inaugural ventures into the now thriving The World Around, as she is the co-founder and executive director. She was then the Brodsky Associate Curator of Architecture and Design at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. With her platform of the world around, she is engaging in the global design community to create impactful change. If you haven't engaged or been to or seen or even heard about the world around, I urge you to explore their archives of talks and summits. It's an essential platform for our time. A bit of background about our distinguished speakers. Kimberly Dowdell earned her bachelor degree from Cornell University and her master's of public administration in urban policy and real estate development, that's a long one, from the Harvard Kennedy School. Notably, her formative years were spent at Cranbrook. Beatrice holds a PhD in architecture from the Royal College of Art and her MA in architectural history from the University College of London. Together, Kimberly and Beatrice represent a vibrant dialogue that promises to illuminate the complexities of our profession and the way forward. I'm confident that tonight's conversation will be both engaging and inspiring. And then a tiny bit of housekeeping is that next month, November 8th, So Il will be in the same position. So I'm proud and excited for David Moo's Cocktail, our bartender for the evening. I don't know how many years he's been doing this, at least 5, 6, I can't see 8, some 10, okay, sorry. He's been doing it for 10. So I think you'll enjoy the evening, and I know you'll enjoy the cocktail. Have a good, so David?
Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me? Yes. Yeah, cool. So I'm David Moo. I'm a bartender. This is my colleague, Nate Renke, who is also a bartender and a master whiskey blender. Toby and I normally do this event, and indeed Toby was involved in this, in making this cocktail to a certain extent. He's in France. No, you cannot hear me. Okay. Can you hear me now? Is that better? How's that? There we go. So, my colleague and friend Toby is not here with us today, but he was somewhat involved in making of this drink. So, hello everybody. How are you? Let me first give you a little bit of a rundown for those of you who haven't been here before as to what it is that we do. It may seem a little bit mysterious. We are tasked with creating or finding or creating, or some combination of those two things, a cocktail that in some way metaphorically represents the work, the personal history, the biography, the tastes and sort of, culinary and bibulous tastes of the subject. Today's subject is Kimberly Dowdell. People find it to be a mysterious question as to how it is that Toby and I make drinks that are somehow metaphorically representative in that way. And those of you who've been here before know that sometimes we are successful at creating something that is both delicious for you to drink and somehow metaphorically representative. And sometimes we are less successful. That's part of the gamble of making stuff, right? So, anyway, here's the deal. When Toby and I have these conversations, this starts with a conversation with an architect. When we have these conversations, we often start by explaining to them exactly what I've just explained to you, and we point out to them that it's not necessary for them to, because many people, their impulse is to help us, and so, which is lovely. That impulse leads them to want to start suggesting drinks to us. And we immediately tell them, like, no, you don't need to suggest drinks to us. We're being paid, reasonable amount of money to suggest drinks for you. So that is not necessary, but what we would like is sort of a set of biographical and sort of taste and interest and certain sort of personality, character things about the person that we are interested in. And we take notes, and then we go away and we come up with a drink, which is then revealed on the night. Here we are. So here's the thing about Kimberly. Kimberly is exceedingly busy and has very little time on her hands to engage in long conversations with unknown bartenders in New York City. And which this could have presented a serious problem, because I did in fact need 15 to 40 minutes of her time. I received, in the end, probably around 17 minutes of her time while she was in a car on the way to the airport. Sorry? You're welcome. Yeah. Thank you. But indeed, it turns out this was not a problem, because having done a little bit of introductory sort of conversation, she then essentially said along the lines of, let's save time. I've basically done your homework for you. She didn't put it that way, but that was essentially the upshot. I then pointed out, I was like, I don't need you to come up with a cocktail. And she was like, sure, but listen. Here's the thing about me. I studied architecture and public management, but then my work as a designer, as you I'm sure have understood already, but before this telephone call, has gotten off track because of my role in sort of leadership and things that have to do with people and government. But I still have, there's still a designer in me that will make work someday. And the things that I'm interested in, and I know that that's what you're interested in, is things that have to do with redevelopment, restoration, the revival of things that were old, right? She said that, and then she said, and in the fall and the winter, I like to drink an old-fashioned. And so I immediately understood what was being said to me, and she was basically like, so here's the deal, you should just make an old-fashioned, but make it, and I understand that that's a very old thing, so you can renovate an old-fashioned in some way. I'm running very late. It was nice talking to you. I have to go. So this was the basic summary of my conversation with Kim. I, resented this conversation. But having thought about it for another 90 seconds, I realized, well, it's not normally the case that architects are actually able to help us in the way that they think they're helping us. But in fact, it turns out that Kim is very good at homework and had, in fact, before knowing anything about the details of what I was going to say, had already 100% understood the kernel of the project, and in speaking to her, had in fact done my homework for her, for me. So thank you very much. It's super refreshing, and I will admit to you all now that I did not earn my fee. So there we go. So what have I done? I have indeed done that. We have created an old-fashioned. Something biographical about Kim is that she's from Michigan, from Detroit. Michigan is the country's second largest grower of apples, after Washington State, and for those of you who care, New York comes in something like third or fourth. It's the fall. She likes to drink an old-fashioned. It's the fall. Apples are in season. So Toby and I, in a short conversation, decided to throw all the apples at the wall. And so that is what we have done here. This is an apple old-fashioned, in which we've taken a whole bunch of apple ideas and sort of shoehorned them into one cocktail. That's the basics of it. We like to give you guys, for those of you who've never been here before, a little bit of history. The old-fashioned is the original cocktail. It is a whiskey cocktail, or a rum cocktail, or a brandy cocktail. In this case, it is a whiskey and brandy cocktail. And because of some historical things that I won't bore you with, unless you want to ask me about them later, this original cocktail later was called the old-fashioned, because people wanted to go back to that original style, the old-fashioned version of that, because there had been some developments along the way, some renovations. And it turns out that it is, in fact, a really ripe ground for renovation. It is very, very easy, and in fact, as Nate maybe will tell you if you have a discussion with him, his crates are very deep as a cocktail bartender. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of old-fashioned variations. So, with that said, there is a modern classic called the American Trilogy, which comes with 3 things in it that are considered to be deeply American. One of them is rye whiskey, another of them is apple brandy, and the third is orange bitters, right? So that's an old-fashioned sweetened with regular sweetener and made in that way. There is another drink, an old refreshment that's called a stone fence. And the stone fence is a glass of hard cider that, as Toby would say, has been notched with a little bit of rye, right? So you take a little bit of whiskey and you make your hard cider harder by adding a little bit of whiskey to it. So what do we have here? We essentially have a stone fence turned on its ear, insofar as we're taking an old-fashioned and we're notching it with a little bit of cider, and an American trilogy, and a couple of moves on that. We're not making it a straight-up American trilogy. Here we go. For this one, instead of sweetening it with regular sugar, we're going to use a boiled apple cider, which is simply apple cider that has been boiled down to, 1 part for its 8-part start, and is quite sour and sweet. So we're going to go with 1 3/4 bar spoons of that product. This particular one, I don't think there's a lot of companies that make this, but this one comes from Vermont, another state noted for its apples. So that's that. And we're going to put in 3 dashes of Angostura bitters. All right. And we're going to give it an ounce of Laird's apple brandy. You will find in the market that you can find something called Laird's Apple Jack, which is an 80 proof product. This is and is not entirely made of apple brandy. It's that mixed with some grain alcohol. This is the pure stuff. It comes in at 100. So that's that. So we'll give you an ounce of that. This is Old Overholt, which for those of you who know me will know that this is something I love. It's a classic American rye. All right. We're gonna chill that with these large ice cubes. Should have brought 2 spoons. I didn't. We're gonna let that hang out for a moment. I'm gonna make an apple garnish for you. Let's hope that I'm gonna make you an apple garnish. Here we go. All right, great. So that's that. So, having chilled this a little bit, we are then, as promised, going to notch that with a little bit of this sort of yeasty, really, really super dry and slightly sour hard cider that I'm in love with, called Graft Farm Floor from New York State. So we're giving it just a little bit of that. And a piece of apple. This I'm calling apples akimbo.
Thank you. I'll try it now. Hold on one moment. Oh, that's good. Nice. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a delight to be here. Oh, actually, sorry. For those who don't know, I actually was an AIANY New York member for over a decade. I lived here for 6 years, and I just never switched my membership. But I did a couple years ago. I now live in Chicago, but I'm a native of Detroit. And I'm really pleased to serve as your 100th AIA president this year, although I only have 9 weeks left. So it's been a dynamic year, to say the least. And I want to talk today a little bit about what I'm calling leadership by design. So I'm going to go through the slides really quickly and then invite Beatrice up to have a dialogue, which is the conversation part, and then we'll finish drinking our cocktails as we're talking. And I think you'll all get cocktails, so it should be a good time for everyone. So just going quickly through my journey, I'm not actually going to read all of that, but that was what was sort of conveyed earlier. So Dale, thank you for the quick overview. And then I did it in logo form, but so if a logo resonates with you, we can talk about it later. And then these are the different cities where I've lived at this point in my life. So just kind of tracking all the places. But let me talk a bit about my mission. which I developed a little over a decade ago, which is to improve the quality of people's lives by design. And that was really rooted in my upbringing in Detroit. So here are some images of Detroit, Michigan, well before I was born. And this particular building is just different images at slightly different times, is of a department store called the Hudson's Department Store. And it was actually, at a certain point in time, the second largest department store in the world. It took up a full city block in Detroit. However, it closed the year that I was born, which was the early 80s, hence me being an elder millennial. So this is what the Hudson's Department Store looked like when I was growing up. And it sort of was an emblem of Detroit's disinvestment and the decline that I think a lot of us sort of know happened to that particular city. But there was a moment in my childhood where I started out with an interest in becoming a doctor, but then I had an epiphany at age 11 that I'll become an architect instead, so that I could fix this building and some of the other sort of problematic parts of Detroit, which in a way, I still see it to this day, architects can be like a doctor, but for their built environment, which obviously helps people. But I didn't get to work on that because they imploded the building just a few years later. However, sort of a somewhat happy story, 30 plus years later, the site, what was known as the Hudson site, is now being redeveloped, and so what will become the second tallest tower in Michigan. But this is sort of a construction photo that I happen to be across the street, so that's where it is today. But this is the building that really kind of sparked my interest in architecture, and not specifically architecture for the sake of the craft, which I think is important, but architecture for the sake of healing. Another sort of better story in Detroit is a building that was considered for demolition, but actually was saved in recent years, and this is the Michigan Central train station in Detroit. And so the image on the left shows the decaying Michigan Central station, or an image of it, I should say, that's in the space, and then this is the actual renovation on the right-hand side. And Ford Motor Company actually purchased this building a number of years ago, probably 2018, and then has been doing a pretty massive renovation since then. So when they actually just opened while I was at AIA24, so I missed the opening on June 6th, but went shortly thereafter, and some folks created a cool Lego model, which engages the kids, and then that's just an image that I took of the building. But my interest, as I mentioned, really started pretty early on. And so when I did my thesis project in architecture school, I looked at what happened to Detroit, what happened to the built environment, like how did we get here? And so part of what I studied was, looking at the image at the top here of a Detroit neighborhood in 1949, and then that same neighborhood with all the decay that had happened in 2003. And I sort of spent years after that even looking at what are some of the things that have factored into that. And so a really good book to take a look at how we got here, and not just Detroit, but many other cities, is a book called The Color of Law, which actually talks about how the erosion of our built environment is based in policy, which is partly why I studied public administration in graduate school. And so another thing that really impacts the way that I think about my work today and what I'd like to do in the future as well is thinking about well-being and life expectancy in particular. I remember seeing this image in 2019, and the thing that's most, I think, jarring for me is the life expectancy difference. So this is Chicago, city where I live now. In part, I also live in Detroit still. So in fact, my neighbor from my building is here as well. So hey, neighbor, in Detroit. But in Chicago, my other place, is there's a discrepancy between, a major disparity. So on the north side of Chicago, the average life expectancy, at least some parts of it, is 90 years of age. But on the south side, in some portions, where it's more red, the darker areas, that life expectancy is 60 years. So a 30-year gap in life is something I think is the built environment has an impact, but there's a much bigger conversation. But what I really have wanted to focus on is how the built environment can help us close those gaps over time. And so I pose the question oftentimes when I speak to students in particular, but just architects in general, or even policymakers: how can we design for life? How can we improve, the health outcomes that people have and extend life and quality? And so I think about some of the aspects of sustainability that don't really just focus on green buildings, which is obviously important, but also equity. And at my firm HOK, we actually just released our work on designing for equity and sort of partnering that with our sustainability work. But if you look at these stats, you see that there are these massive disparities, and how can we as architects and planners and folks who work in the public sector, how can we address these? And so these are questions that I pose to hopefully inspire people to do things that will help address the issues. And then one of the specific areas of the social determinants of health is the neighborhood and built environment. And so that's obviously our space as architects. And so, I always kind of remind people that, it's bigger than us, but we also have a part to play. And so just to get a little bit more specific, here's a stat about, certain neighborhoods and, their, exposure to pollutants and then also just kind of making people aware of the key issues that we have to really examine in vulnerable communities. And I won't read all of this, and, probably gonna fly through the rest of my slides pretty quickly so we can get to the conversation part. But I think it's important for us to look at protection from toxic environments, access to open space and parks, proximity to public transit, and all of the things that kind of come together to create the health outcomes that we are most interested in. And so that's partly the work that we're doing at AIA to kind of help empower our members to understand these issues, but also to take the the framework for design excellence as a tool, and specifically the 10 design principles. If you want to learn a little bit more about the framework for design excellence, there's a QR code. But I think it's important that industry organizations really sort of take the lead in doing the research and helping our members really have the resources they need to do their best work. And so the mission of AIA is to empower and inspire architects to improve society and transform the world. And this is just one sort of part of that, of many different resources that we have. And so just the kind of quick overview here, these are the elements of the framework for design excellence that we encourage all of our members. In fact, all the awards that that deal with design are kind of run through this framework, which is an important way to kind of help our members understand how important these elements are. And so sometimes I quote myself. So when I was president of NOMA a number of years ago, I had a piece in Architect magazine, and I say our duty as an architect is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, the entire public. And the buildings that we design are meant to shelter everyone and, to the extent possible, to create delight. And so one of the things I get a little flack about is that I haven't really designed many buildings personally. And yes, I've worked at HOK for a number of years, and I've worked on a small part of an airport, and I've worked on a small part of a corporate office building, and things like that. But I don't take credit for that because it's a bigger team. But this is a project that I actually worked on as an owner's rep. When I was living in New York, I worked for Levy & Company at that point in time. And this project I managed, it's actually not too far from here, but not super close, though. It's in Newark, New Jersey. So, but relatively close. It's not in the Midwest. But anyway, so this is a before and after shot of Military Park. And there actually, if you look closely, there were two really small buildings. So I have worked on some buildings. But anyway, the point is, parks are a really important aspect of our built environment. And so I also just wanted to show you something that I worked on. And then a quote from Cory Booker, who at the time that the project was funded and kicked off, he was the mayor, and obviously he's since become a senator. But he said American cities require strong parks and urban spaces. And I think from the earlier slides you can see how important it is that we really think through the kinds of resources that we invest in, especially in our inner cities, that can hopefully help promote life and the quality thereof. So here we are, cocktails and conversation. So as was mentioned, I haven't worked on a ton of building projects, but I do a lot of talking. So this is me talking, and I'm talking now, and I've been talking quite a bit since 2019 when I was NOMA president. So I spent 2 years in that role. So it was actually 6 years. 2 years as president-elect, 2 years as president, and then 2 years as immediate past president. And then I thought I was done, and then someone said, you really need to run for AIA president. And I said, no, thank you. And then they kept coming back, and I was like, all right, I will run and see what happens. So here we are. So I have the honor of serving as president-elect last year and this year as president. And I just think it's really important to use this platform as a way to elevate the profession of architecture, not just for the sake of the architect's ego, but really to help inform the public about how important the built environment is and the sort of betterment of the built environment, how architects play a really important role in that. And so that is what I do a lot of talking about, frankly. So I want to speak about high level what I did as NOMA president, and then also what I'm doing as AIA president now. And I like rhyming, I like alliteration and things that make it really easy to remember stuff. So when I was NOMA president, my slogan was "All in for NOMA." And that signaled a couple of things. One, everyone should really consider NOMA as a resource that they can use to help diversify the profession of architecture, which I won't even go into the details. We know it's not a particularly diverse profession, but NOMA's working on that, and AI is working with NOMA on that. But back when I was president, there are 3 specific things that I really wanted to advance through programming, and it was access, leadership, and legacy. So all being acronym for access, leadership, and legacy. Access meaning helping bring access to K through 12 students, college students, really organizing that kind of early career. Leadership was about fostering leadership with young adults and people throughout kind of the middle part of their career. And legacy was about helping our more seasoned architects think about succession planning and retirement and things like that. And so kind of the full spectrum, all in for NOMA. So again, a lot of the programming was around that and raising awareness. And I think it resonated with people because we were more communicative with our members, and we were more, just sort of visible in terms of the profession. So our membership went from 902 members when I started to 2,464, over the course of 2 years. And now NOMA has, I think, close to 4,000 members, which is great. So then fast forward to 2024. My slogan, how many people know, what is it? More. Yes. See, plus it rhymes too. It makes it easier. So more in 24 is my, it's also there. But the 3 specific things, which are not on the slide here, that I've really, grounded myself in, or really our board and anyone who will listen to me, frankly, are 3 things: more money, more members, and more mission. Architects are generally not compensated sufficiently for the work that we do, the value that we create, and we have to talk about that out loud and just do a better job. And so one of the things I've been trying to push through the AIA advocacy work is improving those conditions. One very specific thing that we did, which I won't take credit for because it started 10 years ago, or probably more than that, but getting the Department of Defense just at the end of last year agreed to increase the cap on service, the fee cap on services from 6% to 10%. So, I mean, that's a little bit of movement. We'd like to actually advocate for some of the other, or all of the other agencies to do the same, but we actually like to remove the cap because, we should not have the caps. But that's how government works. But the point is, I think it's important for us to really advocate for ourselves. And so more money is a big piece of it. And not just, again, for the sake of prosperity, but also we're losing a lot of young talent to other professions because they pay more. And I left New York City 10 years ago, but I hear it's more expensive now. In fact, I know for a fact it's more expensive now. But young people coming out of school, they're not getting paid that much more than 10, 15, 20 years ago. So we just have to address it. I don't have all the solutions, but I'm certainly going to ask the question and sort of turn it over to you all to help figure it out. So that's more money, more members. At the end of last year, we had about 98,000 members. And so as the 100th president, I would like to get to 100,000 members. And I'm pleased to report that as of today, we have actually just over 98,000 members. So we are very close to getting to our 100,000, which should happen before December. So there will be a big hubbub about that when it happens, which will be very exciting. But again, it's not just members for the sake of members. It's about going to Congress and saying, hey, we represent over 100,000 architects and allied professionals who are interested in X, Y, or Z. And also the membership dollars help with funding all the different programs that we do to advance our mission. And so speaking of more mission, again, that mission is to empower and inspire architects to improve society and transform the world. And the 2 key strategic priorities that are part of this strategic plan are climate action and equity. And so we've been very focused on that work over the last 5 years in particular, and we'll continue forward on that. So those are the two leadership roles that I've had, and that's what I do so much talking about these days. And I also do a lot of travel. So this is just a snapshot. I do a Monday post. So I just did week 42, so that's how I know I have 9 weeks left. So on Monday, I will post my 43rd week. And I just, just kind of takes you through the different places that I've been. Most notably, lots of different chapter visits all around the country. I've done some international visits. I've been to Paris and Madrid, specifically to kind of go to climate-related conferences. In August, I was in Abuja, Nigeria, and Mombasa in Kenya to kind of actually welcome our brand new Sub-Saharan Africa section of AI International. Next month, or no, this month, because it's October already. Later this month, I'll be going to Hong Kong for our AI International Conference. So lots of travel, lots of visits, lots of touch points. But it's important for people to know that AI is working on their behalf. And so even this is not an official AI channel. It's just like my own personal Instagram page, and I also link to LinkedIn and X or Twitter, whatever you want to call that. So just want to let people know that we're actively advocating and trying to kind of spread the good message. So here's just a quick overview of the AI International Conference in Hong Kong. Anyone here planning to go to that? No? Okay, well, I'll be there representing your voice, but super excited about that. And AI actually has over 205 chapters, obviously mostly in the United States, but also increasingly abroad. And so we want to make sure that we're connecting with our international members. And then I'm also going to COP29 to discuss our climate, which is kind of a big deal. That'll be in Baku later in November. And then after that, right after that, I'm going to Kuala Lumpur for the International Union of Architects Conference. So AI is a member among all the other countries that have architecture organizations, and so we talk about architecture globally and what we can and should be doing, particularly on climate action, but so many other things related to the practice that connects us all. So that's another touch point that we take seriously. One of the things that I'm actually most proud of is the Chief Architect Initiative. So last year when I was president-elect, our then president, Emily Grandstaff Rice, she was invited to two things at the same time, and we haven't invented cloning yet. So she asked me to take this event in her stead while she went to the other event. And so here I was, very early in my president-elect year, and I'm speaking to the mayors of America, which is slightly intimidating. But right before that meeting, I met with AI staff to talk about what's our message, what do we want to convey to the mayors, or what's the ask. And we were just kind of workshopping. And I thought, having had experience in the federal government and the office of the chief architect, I was like, well, how many cities actually have a chief architect to advise the mayor on a lot of the issues that are, that are related to the built environment? And I learned from one of our AI staff members, who's also an architect, Michael Wen. He said, well, actually, many U.S. cities used to have a chief architect, maybe 60, 70 plus years ago, but that role went away for whatever reason. So I was like, well, that should be our ask. So I got on stage and I told mayors that architects are the civic problem solvers they didn't know that they needed, and that they need to go ahead and hire an architect to be their key advisor on issues related to climate action, affordable housing, public safety, or whatever the issues are for their city. And so right after I got off stage, the mayor of Durham, North Carolina, came up to me and said, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because I came to this conference looking for my big idea, and I think this is it. And so fast forward to this year, I went to the U.S. Conference of Mayors, their summer meeting, and that same mayor said, I was able to get this passed in my budget. So they're actually hiring a chief architect in Durham, which is very exciting. And so I hope other cities, even if they don't tell me about it, that they're doing this. And that, again, it's not just about, celebrating a particular architect. It's having that architect, the right architect, doing that work with the mayor, kind of rolling up their sleeves, looking at the critical issues in the city, and being a really important advisor, and also raising the public profile of architects and helping people understand what we do. And it's not always just the same kind of stuff that people assume that we do. So we'll see if this works. But I'm going to end soon, but I'll end with like one of my favorite moments this year. Actually, as I mentioned, I grew up in Detroit, went to Detroit Public Schools, and so this is my actual elementary school that I visited. I visited a group of third graders. I'm obviously much older now, and it was like a full circle moment to go back to this place that that shaped me as a little person. And they have like the wildest questions. Someone asked me about locust invasions and how you deal with that in architecture. And I was like, I'm sure there's a consultant for that. But anyway, so Architecture Week is something that we host every year, and I'm pretty sure the New York chapter gets involved in their own special way. And so that's something that we do nationally to kind of help promote that sort of K through 12 engagement. And so when it comes around this year or this coming year in 2025. And I think it's usually mid-April. I hope that you'll all get involved, go back to your own school or some other school, and help people understand the power and potential of being an architect. So with that, I will say thank you, and you can email me or whatever.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I'm Beatrice. Wow, we have a super full house. It's so nice. Kimberly, I have to ask you to try your drink first. We need your immediate feedback.
It was great, but it's had a chance to rest a little bit. So.
Yeah, my ice cubes dissolved a little bit. I was nervous about drinking too much because you went. It is?
It's amazing. I mean, I took a picture of the recipe. I don't know that I'll be able to recreate it exactly the way that you did, but I'm going to try.
I really like it, actually. I think, yeah.
Take your camera.
Thank you. I'll say that again. I took a picture of the recipe, and I will try to recreate it, although you did it so masterfully, I don't know that I can, but I'll try.
It's video,
so you'll have a chance to copy.
Oh, perfect.
a lot of alcohol, some cider, some sort of slicing of apples. I don't know, delicious.
I can do the apple part.
Delicious.
Sure.
So thank you so much for your presentation, and thanks for inviting me to be part of this, and thanks for the shout out to the World Around, which I will do again. Everyone can go to theworldaround.com if they're interested and learn more about the role of civic architecture in society. I think that we're doing our best to sort of support your goals for the AIA.
Thank you.
So you kind of jumped me because you already mentioned my first question, which was when did you realize that you wanted to be an architect? And you mentioned that that building that kind of inspired you when you were a little girl.
Well, there's more.
Tell
more
me
to
if
the
there's
story.
okay.
Yes.
Lean in.
So what I didn't mention is that I didn't just wake up one day knowing what an architect was. I was in a middle school art class, which is actually one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about art and education. So in Chicago, I'm actually chair of the board for an organization called Ingenuity Chicago, which works to ensure that all Chicago public school students have access to high quality arts education. Because if you don't have arts access, then how do you even know what the possibilities are? So I was in an art class, and our art teacher gave us all little shoe boxes and said, in little carpet samples and blocks, and said, make an apartment. And so that's literally how I learned what an architect was, in art class. So that's how this all started.
I had an interesting story about that. I grew up in London, and we had a similar story, but there was this disparity of people that grew up in housing estates who thought houses were shoeboxes vertically, and people that grew up in kind of suburban rows that thought they were horizontal. And we had such an interesting conversation around, what it means to what's a house and what does a house look like at also kind of a young age. And I was reminded of that when you were mentioning that. Was there a moment when you realized that it was more than just being an architect for you, that you and yourself could be an advocate? Did something happen? What sort of drove you into this role of being a leader?
Yeah, I think, so it's interesting. I'm sitting in New York. My first visit to New York, I'm pretty sure was, the one that I really remember was 20 years ago, when I actually came to my very first NOMA conference as a student. So I was a part of the student design competition. And that was where it really sort of became clear to me that, well, one, I didn't know that organizations like that existed, professional organizations and, participating in a design competition. It was like all very new at that point. And that's when, like, I noticed there were things that, like, we could, like, NOMA could have done better, so I, like, made suggestions. And then, like, what happens when you make suggestions in any organization, frankly, is they're like, all right, well, you should be on this committee. And I was like, okay. So then, like, I made enough suggestions and, like, done enough committee work to then be invited to join the board for NOMA, like, right out of college as a university liaison. And then I kept making suggestions, and then actually, I left the NOMA board so I could actually get licensed, because I was like a whole process. I couldn't do like my day job and do NOMA stuff and then also get licensed. So I took a break, and then they came back and said, you should be president. And I was like I'm still on a break. But anyway, so, and then I think similar with, with many organizations, I think we get involved, and people sort of look to you for not just the answers, but more questions, right? And so, like, if you're sort of good at asking questions and following up and helping people kind of move toward a solution, that's when they put you in charge. So.
And I'm talking about NOMA. You were president when the pandemic arrived, right?
Yeah, I didn't know that was going to happen.
That was poor timing on your part. But can you speak a little bit about that experience? Because I think for many of us, there was this, I mean, of course everyone was at home, but there was also the racial reckoning of 2020. You were president during that time too. How did you navigate that experience, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were all going through the trauma of that experience together. And one of the things that I sort of borrowed from my workplace, at the time I was really sort of headquartered in the HOK Chicago studio, and our managing principal, Ricardo Masha, he would send the staff like Monday through Friday, every single day, just a note, because we're all at home. And he would send a note about, something about the business or a new pursuit, or just, I mean, almost like something about his weekend or whatever, just to kind of like keep a touch point, because, we're not in the office for quite some time. And so I took a page from that playbook, and I decided to start sending the NOMA membership an email every Thursday. Couldn't do daily, that's too much, but every Thursday. And I think it was important for people to just know that they're not alone. I mean, yes, you might be sitting in your apartment alone, but you're connected to this organization. That was, maybe part of the value proposition at that time. But one of the things that, people sort of compliment me on is sort of authentic leadership. Like, I'm just gonna more or less tell you like how I'm feeling. I mean, I do have a filter, like, but I like more or less like sort of share like how I see things, and like, just put it out there. And so I had the opportunity, or I took the opportunity to do that after the murder of George Floyd, when it happened, and we were all kind of like sitting in our living rooms watching all the things that happened right after, and there just hadn't really been much of a response like that that I felt really resonated. And so I took it upon myself to write something that sort of captured how I was feeling, how I felt like many of the people who I was in touch with, my members at the time, were feeling. And that seemed to have garnered a lot of support and a lot of traction. We saw NOMA's membership expand significantly after that point. But it was still a tough year. We had to, like everyone, we had to cancel our conference, and that meant different things financially. And but I think the most important thing was maintaining sort of the open communication, and just kind of letting people know that we're here, like you're here. And we also created a Stay All In series, because it was already all in. So it was like stay in, like stay all, like don't go outside. And so we had, interesting speakers, join us on webinars and things like that. So for me, it was about leading in a different way, because prior to that, so I was president for 2 years. So in 2019, I was doing all the chapter visits and all the things like in person, which were really important to people, but 2020, that was off the table. So we had to get really creative about how to connect with people and make them feel connected.
And I think at the same time in 2020, there was like also a kind of sort of interconnection of the racial disparity and also the kind of ecological reckoning, and those two things becoming more and more clearly how interconnected they are. Your slide showing the the people that experience pollution in urban cities are minorities, and people that don't experience pollution tend to be white. And I think more and more the interconnection between our city sustainability and racial justice became more and more kind of cohesive and clear to people. And how do you see? Do you agree with that? And also, what do you see going forward from that? How architects have responded in terms of urban planning, in terms of housing? Has there been enough change, in your opinion?
I mean, I think that the conversation definitely was elevated at that point in time. We're certainly not where we want to be today, but I think that the conversation continues to evolve. You know, I mentioned the work that we're doing at HOK in terms of our Designing for Equity work, and I know lots of other firms are doing similar types of things to better connect, you know, all of the different aspects of design that really should be thought of together. But you know, we still have a ways to go, and our hope is that the work that's done through AIA and the Framework for Design Excellence, the Committee on the Environment, and the top, the COAT Top 10 awards, you know, really thinking about not just the sustainability pieces, but the broader sense of sustainability. Another sort of fun fact that I didn't talk much about here is when I was actually an intern for the Office of the Chief Architect at the General Services Administration back in the summer of 2005, I came up with an idea to help address that, and it was supposed to be kind of a counterpart to the LEED rating system, because again, I like to rhyme. We called it SEED, and SEED still stands for Social, Economic, Environmental Design. And so a group of us, decided to kind of rally around this notion to like really start to measure the social impacts of projects. And the mission statement that we developed, which still exists, is to advance the right of every person to live in a socially, economically, environmentally healthy community. And I think to some extent we were a little ahead of our time. I mean, that was like 20 years ago. And so I think that there's more of an appetite for those discussions now, but there's still quite a bit more work to do to like get clients to understand the connection and to actually invest in that work.
At the World Around, we have a program called the Young Climate Prize. And the Young Climate Prize is our mentorship program for under 25s all over the world, as everything we do is the world around. But the people that we support, the under 25s, are people that are experiencing the climate crisis firsthand, not only because of their age, but their geographic location, largely from the global south. And they're on the front lines of the climate crisis. They are vulnerable in all kinds of different ways, but they're also using design to address the issues that they're facing and try and overcome them through whether it's material innovation, like entrepreneurial initiatives, some people creating farms, some people working in refugee camps and creating shelters, some people living inside refugee camps and creating educational processes. And we connect these young people all over the world with a mentor from the architecture and design community. So we have architects and leaders from the US, from the UK, largely from the global north. And they basically spend time with these kids online, obviously, and be a mentor. And sometimes that means being a friend and listening, and sometimes it means being an advocate. Sometimes it means, spending time like kneeling out details. But we found that this role, this sort of transfer of resources from those who have it in the global north to those who need it, oftentimes in the global south, has been a really powerful way for our community of architects and designers to learn more about what's going on in the global south and what's going on with the people who are not seeing climate change as a hypothetical, but are dealing with it every day and are trying to overcome it in their daily lives. And so, I was thinking about this in terms of what the AIA is doing and your work when you were mentioning global outreach. How does the AIA navigate the US as such a world leader versus, like the rest of the world? How do you integrate AIA International? What's your strategy for that?
Yeah, well, I think part of it is going out to meet with our members who are, who are living abroad. Meet them where they are and help them understand what resources are available and invite them to our conference. We have some of our newer members who have joined the Sub-Saharan Africa section who are joining us in Hong Kong because they want to participate in our Global Practice Committee. They want to participate in our AI 2030 commitment, which a growing number of firms are signing up for, learn more about our materials pledge to, again, kind of move the needle on these issues that do impact the global South more acutely. And so I think it's about creating this exchange so that, us here, in the continental U.S., like having the opportunity to talk about our work and celebrate our work, but also learn about the projects it's not our area of expertise to design in, to design in Nigeria. That's not something that we have that experience, and so creating those important exchanges and just getting people together is an important part of what AIA does, and so just trying to facilitate that in multiple formats. And for example, we just had a virtual mentorship session with the president of the Architectural Association of Kenya. She spoke, to a group of, mostly it seemed like younger architects, but she broke the record for the number of people who engaged in an AI international call. I think there were over 80 people who were just listening to hear about design from a global perspective, specifically in Kenya. And she talked about her design work and her leadership of the Architectural Association of Kenya, and then people, engaged in a really important conversation. So I think those kinds of things, and then the in-person touch points are vital to creating that sort of cross, or international connectivity.
Actually, there's this great project in Kenya called She Build. Do you know about that?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
They because one of the issues with gender equity in the built environment is that not just there's not very many architects who are female, but also there's not very many people in the whole construction industry. There's not very many developers that are female. There's not many construction workers that are female. And so She Build is based out of Nairobi, and they have a training system for young female architects, but also young female construction workers, young female in sort of budding developers. So that's a super
can I add one more thing about my trip to Kenya? One
Please.
of the things, so actually not just Kenya, Nigeria. I was in Maui earlier in the year, and many other cities are dealing with the affordable housing crisis. I mean, here it's an issue everywhere, frankly. But I remember specifically going on a tour when I was at the conference in Kenya, and we did a bus tour, and we drove into an informal settlement. And these folks just made their own community, literally with their own hands. And someone asked, "Oh, well, what architects?" There are no architects involved. They just do it themselves. And I think there's an opportunity. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do work for free, but I think we should find a way to get philanthropic support to help us help other communities, or have communities that need our support reach out to us. And I think we just need to create more connectivity so that we can find the resources to pay ourselves, because that's not something that we should leave on the table, but also leverage our expertise to actually create better buildings for these folks, because they're going to do it on their own. It's a survival mechanism, right? But one of the other issues that they have in that part of the world is building collapse, because if you don't have the right expertise, you're not going to have, the appropriate buildings to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. So there's a lot of opportunity out in the world, and I think we have to do a better job of connecting with the need and leveraging our resources to protect people.
Going back to mentors, did you have a mentor?
Yes, I have many mentors in this room. In fact, I'm not going to call them all out, because if I forget someone, then they're going to be mad at me later. So, but one in particular, actually, I will call out Frank Wilkinson. Where's Frank? Oh, did he? Oh, there. Oh, you're right there. So, so Frank and I, he graduated from Cornell a bit earlier than I did, and he is very intentional about coming back to campus. He probably still come back to campus to this day, but this was 20 plus years ago, and I was really nervous about getting my very first internship. And he was like, "Well, here's a list of firms that you might look at," because I was doing an internship I was looking at doing an internship in DC, and he just gave me a list of firms to call, and I very nervously called these cold called. I talked to the receptionist, and I was like, "Hi, I'm a third year," and so eventually I got the second or third firm that I called, they hired me for my first internship. So I always credit Frank for bringing me to where I am today. So, yes. But many other mentors, again, in this room, that was like, you were like the original person, but particularly through the NOMA network and you know, later, a little bit later on, AIA. So, and I always tell young people to surround yourself with mentors. Have like at least 5, because sometimes people are busy, and so like, you know, you've got to have
mentors.
You got to have like backup. But also, I tell people in general, I believe in this concept that I like to call 360 mentorship, because I mean, I can learn from like Gen Zers. How many Gen Zers are in the room? Any? Okay, a couple. You guys know stuff too. Like, like I need help with like understanding how AI works. So I'm just gonna put that out there. And but you know, I think it's like everyone brings a level of expertise despite their age, and so I always encourage people to you know, to just connect with people and be a resource and absorb what you can.
That's awesome. I also am a geriatric millennial. So
We're not geriatric. We're elder millennial. Elder millennial.
I think there was like someone came up with like exennial, which I was like, that's so
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I'm an exennial, and then it was like, no, you're a geriatric millennial. That's the technical term. I also need to pick up my mentor. I need to get like 4 more mentors.
Yes.
Catch up. Okay, that's good to know. I wanted to ask a little bit about like, you know, in white firms, oftentimes like we're trying to do so much better as a sort of discipline in architecture, and many friends of mine, or you know, I hear kind of as part of the world around that people, especially women of color who are inside predominantly white working environments, are asked to not only do the job but also be advocates at the same time, and at the same time they also have to navigate all of the prejudices of like working on site, or all of the complications of people in the office who may not know or may make microaggressions and may be complicated to work with. And what advice do you have for young people kind of going into the workplace and sort of being isolated in that way? Or how do firms, maybe people who are running firms, prevent that and do better for those young people?
Yeah, so one of the reasons why actually, I'm a HOK boomeranger, so I actually started in the HOK New York office 16 years ago, and I was there for 3 years and left to do some of the stuff that I shared on the screen. But you know, the firm at that point in time, you know, was really supportive of me and the work that I was doing through NOMA and other things. And at that point, a younger group of us had created a program called HOK Impact, and so it was kind of our it would still exist, our corporate social responsibility arm. And so that was something that gave me a lot of you know, confidence in the firm's like leadership to kind of be forward thinking. And then when I came back in 2019 in the Chicago studio, at that point the firm had formalized what's called the Diversity Advisory Council, and then I was asked to be one of the 3 co-chairs. And so through our work at HOK, and I know many firms do similar things, you know, we have to be really intentional about you know, actually surveying our staff. So every other year we conduct what's called the Career and Opportunity Survey, so that we actually sort of take the temperature of the entire firm to see where we can make improvements and how people are feeling about their opportunities and mentorship and all of those things. And so we create programs to address those issues. We also have a mentorship program and a scholarship program and all these things. And so I think it's important for us to, you know, align ourselves with organizations that support that work. And if you're in a position of authority or power within your organization, to you know, take the lead on creating those things if they don't already exist. So again, I think it's about being intentional. It's about asking questions, about making suggestions, and of course they'll put you in charge of this stuff. But I think it's really important to also, you know, if you do find yourself carrying a lot of the load because of your gender or racial identity, it's also important to surround yourself with a support system that will help you navigate those challenges, because they do exist. So, yeah.
Multiple mentors, I think, still stands strong.
Mentors,
Advice.
good network of friends, many of whom are in this room, so hello, friends.
I have a question about, which we also come up with a lot at the World Around, which is the sort of perception gap between the way that architects see themselves. I don't consider myself an architect, but I do advocate for architects, and
Thank you for your advocacy.
really believe in architecture as one of the most important things that can improve society and really be a force of good. And yet, when I do a temperature check of people that are not direct family members of mine and haven't been bombarded with architecture stories for 20 years, they're quite confused when they hear that architects see themselves as a force for good. They're like, wait, like skyscrapers or like interior design? Like, do you experience that perception gap? And what can architects do to better how can advocates do better, like me? But also, how can architects do better?
Yeah, many people in my life don't understand what architects do. And then I confuse things because I don't actually like do building. So they're like, what do you do? But that's neither here nor there. But I think for people who practice in the more traditional sense, I think it's vital that that people tell the stories about their projects and the impact that the projects are having. Have maybe to some extent having clients talk about that impact is important. And I'm looking at HOK's communications director Stephanie does a tremendous job of telling project stories. Stephanie and her team. So I encourage all firms to really get out there and really talk about the work that you do, the impact that it has. That's actually another reason why I've really been advocating for the Chief Architect Initiative, because imagine if every city actually has, a person in a pretty high-profile role that can talk about the work that they do and also really, elevate the work that architects within their city, what they do. I feel like that's a solution that's like fairly low-hanging fruit. Do we? Oh. We're out of time. Okay, this is the last. So those are kind of high level, some of the things that I think we can and should be doing to elevate what architects do and the solutions that we can bring to some of our most complex problems.
I actually love the idea of the chief architect. I think it's brilliant. And in London, I was just in a talk in London with Peter Murray, who runs the kind of, not the AIA, but something a bit like that in London.
The Royal Institute of British
London
Architects?
Festival, New London Architecture, thank you. And he was advocating for a chief architect of London. And I did make him name names. So I'm gonna ask you, who would be a great chief architect for New York?
Oh, like
Yes.
right now?
Go. And
Susan Chin. No offense to anyone else who's here. She's amazing. I'm looking right at her, but everyone should consider it. One last thing on sort of that topic. I think about a dear friend of mine who I met through NOMA, who's unfortunately passed away recently, Prescott Rivas. He used to really work closely with young students. He would call them youth spatial activists, and he would go into communities and just expose, K through, actually it was probably more like middle school, elementary school students, to some of the complexities of their community and help them understand how design can be part of the solution. So what's nice about that is, yes, it sort of plants the seeds in the minds of these little kids, but also they go home and they talk to their parents about the power of design or what they think the power of design is. So I think you've got to hit it at multiple levels.
Well, that's a good place for us to go to the next part of the program.
Great.
So let's everyone get a thank you to the two. I was going to just say So I was going to just ask for everyone to say thank you to our two. If you want to ask a question, my request is that you stand up and that you shout. I'll call.
Hi. Thank you very much for all this. So I just wanted to bring up a couple of things.
Louder.
8 years ago, 2018. 6 years ago. 6 years ago. Thank you. That's the cocktail. The New York chapter had their first convention, national conference for the first time in 30 years. And I remember sitting at a keynote speaker address, and we'll try this. Can you all hear me? Okay. Things do work. So in 2018, they were saying that there was an address 50 years prior in 1968, that statistics were looked at for specifically African American architects, and the numbers of registered architects nationally are about 3%, and the needle hadn't changed in 50 years. Can you give a little update where we are now? You've done some tremendous work with NOMA. NOMA didn't exist 50 years ago, but it's certainly made tremendous inroads. And I know that it's all about one hire at a time, advocating. I've done my bit to try to do that in the public sector, but I'd love to hear some of your discussion on that.
Well, thank you for the question. So yeah, NOMA was founded in 1971, and at that point in time, the percentage of Black architects in the United States was around 2%. Here we are, all these years later, and that number is now 2%. Unfortunately. So NOMA, well, prior to NOMA, it was sort of handled by the University of Cincinnati and Dennis Mann and Brad Grant, but NOMA took over what's called the Directory of African American Architects, which I understand is now being rebranded to include other racial groups, which I think is great. But for many years, that database tracked Black architects. And so I remember when I got licensed in 2013 here in New York, I was number 295 for Black women, like total. And now I think it's like a little over 600. But we mostly know each other because it's such a small community. And I think total it's probably a little over 2,500 Black architects. So just for context, there are 120,000 licensed architects in the United States. So it's actually not very large. There are more attorneys just in the state of California than there are architects everywhere. So we have some work to do in general.
$750 an hour here.
Yes, so that's a whole different conversation. But in fact, one of the reasons why I ultimately got off the fence about running for AIA president is because, and at that time, the 165-year history of the organization, there had never been a Black woman. I'm the 7th female president and the 3rd Black president, and I just felt like we need to just do that, get it out of the way. And what's important about that is actually a note that I got from a college student who attends an HBCU, right, like shortly after the election, and she wrote me a whole email with like multiple paragraphs. And the email in like the middle paragraph said, "Because you won, I feel like my dreams are more possible." And like that kind of like made it super real. It was already real, but it's like this is bigger than me. And so that's one of the reasons why I say representation matters, and if people see themselves represented in leadership, that gives them the inspiration to kind of like stick with it. And so I checked on her this year, and she's doing very well. She's on the dean's list and all this stuff. So that's working out. But hopefully, other people see themselves reflected. Not just Black women, but women in general, people of color, younger people. Any kind of human that exists. It's like, hey, I like what she's doing. Great. But in terms of the numbers, they have not changed much. Yes, we're talking about larger numbers, but the percentages are the same. And there are just some real challenges that we have to have sober, well, not now, but sober conversations about, because there are some impediments. When you look at Black-owned businesses and the challenges that they face, when you look at the politics within larger firms, the difficulty of starting a firm and maintaining. There are all kinds of challenges that no matter what your race or gender is, like architecture is a tough business, but when you layer on the complexities of bias and just the stuff that happens in the world, it makes it more challenging. So there's a lot more work to do, and hopefully through the work of AIA and NOMA and other organizations, we can hopefully change those statistics before too long.
So I'll ask a question since it doesn't seem
I
to
had
be
a question.
much. Oh,
Hi.
okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Wonderful talk. I came across a statistic recently that actually really surprised me. I came across a statistic recently that surprised me and that I felt like I should have known that or known more about it. The average cost right now of an architect to be educated per year ranges from a high of $98,000 plus to around $50,000, and that's for the B.Arch degree. That's not considering even the 4+2 or the 4+3. Given what we know is the average starting price of an architect, do you see a space for the AIA and the Academy to begin to really think viscerally around what we value in terms of who gets access to our profession and how we prepare architects to join our profession?
Yeah, so I haven't figured that out. But I mean, I know it's a major issue. One of the things I don't think was discussed earlier. So I'm actually a university trustee, and so I see the numbers. Like we have to approve the tuition. I'm like, oh man, I don't want to approve it, but like I know the number. Like to make the university work, you have to kind of like do the difficult things. But certain schools are better with providing resources like scholarship support. But the larger issue is education is super expensive no matter what kind of school you go to, wherever it is. And except for places where it's free, where are those places? Oh, Scotland. Okay, but here in the United States, it's generally quite expensive. And that's one of the reasons why the first pillar of my More in 24 is more money, because we have to have those conversations directly. Starting salaries, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but they're probably still hovering around $60,000. No? Is that?
You'll be lucky.
Oh, is it?
Oh, you make $60,000?
Okay, that was like when I was coming out. So okay, well that's terrible. I'm sorry. Anyway, so we have to do better. Like I don't have a specific solution because it's a very complicated problem, but what we're going to see is more people are going to just choose to do something else. And then as a profession, we're in trouble. So, I mean, this is an urgent matter. We have to and so I think part of the question is, well, what is the AIA going to do about it? I mean, we're talking about it. We also have to not get in trouble with antitrust, which is something we got in trouble with in the 80s. So we have to be very, very careful, but intentional about addressing the issues.
We have an issue with the antitrust. The AIA was busted in 1972 by the DOJ for bid rigging or price fixing, and again in 1990. So what I want you to do is go back and sue the federal government as a class action suit for price fixing, because the GSA and all the other related government agencies have a fixed cap on fees at 6%, except for DOF.
DOD, or Department of Defense.
Yeah. DOD. So go back and tell council to file a class action suit against the federal government for price fixing. Turn it on them.
I will take it to the evidence department.
I have a question. In the UK, there is a sort of, I don't know how it is here, fees are very different in the UK, meaning that they're affordable. But the percentage of people going into architecture school from ethnic minorities is proportionate to the number of ethnic minorities like in the UK. But the figures are similar to the US. So that's something, I don't know if you have those stats to hand, but there's a huge drop-off from architecture school being fairly reflective of the community at large to practicing architects, where there's a huge drop-off. I don't know if that is the same here.
We have a similar dynamic here. I don't know that architecture school is sort of at the same level that it is there, but there's also a drop-off in the profession. So it's a complicated set of issues, and we just have to keep chipping away at it. I wish I had the answer. Yes.
You're going to need to speak very loudly or move.
I can use my outside voice. Can you hear me from here?
Yes.
Hi, my name is July, and I heard you speak earlier about art education and your experiences in early development, kind of understanding what architecture is as a profession. And I was wondering, because I personally didn't know architecture as a career until my first year of college, didn't understand that architects could be more than just builders of skyscrapers and the impact that they can have on community until my junior year. So I was wondering what thoughts you might have about increasing accessibility of the profession itself to younger children, to maybe promote and uplift the generation of younger minorities to actually get in and recognize that they can be change makers.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I know that AIA, does work in the K through 12 space, and different chapters kind of specialize in different aspects of that. But here I actually really want to highlight the work that NOMA has been doing since 2005, actually, with the Project Pipeline summer camps. So there's a network of, I think, probably close to 3 dozen summer camps that specifically target where there are NOMA chapters and where there's sort of a concentration of students of color, specifically middle school and high school students. So again, being intentional about, meeting people where they are, going to those communities and saying, hey, here's a group of professionals that are doing work that will actually have an impact on your future. And so if you want to be involved in this, learn about, how to make, how to create an apartment out of a shoebox, or whatever the particular project is. And so I think tapping into organizations like NOMA, like AIA, and others that are really going into the communities, I think is really important. And it's not sort of a one and done kind of thing. You have to keep showing up and be consistent with those efforts. And also the ACE Mentor Program is a great resource that's nationwide. For those who aren't familiar, it stands for Architecture, Construction, Engineering. And when I was actually in New York, I participated as a mentor. It was a great experience.
So to continue with education, in terms of how you started, so I was really intrigued that you went to Cranbrook, and I'd like to know how you got there and what you think impact it had on you. And everyone here may or may not know about Cranbrook. You might tell them a little bit about it.
Sure.
Because it's a special place.
Yeah, so the Cranbrook Educational Community is about 35 minutes north of Detroit. And I had a really unique opportunity. I was a full tuition scholarship boarding student, so I actually lived on this really beautiful campus that was designed by the Saarinen, over 100 years ago, or 100 years ago, approximately. And it was just, so it was like a, was it pre-kindergarten through 12th grade, and then they skip college, and there's the graduate art program, art and architecture. So a really unique place to kind of spend my 9th through 12th grade years. I was very fortunate, and I think it impacted me in the way that it reiterated the value of art. I mean, I also come from a family of artists, so that doesn't hurt. But there was a inscription on one of the arches that said, "A life without beauty is only half lived," and that sort of like permeated throughout the campus. So I was very fortunate, and I think everyone should have access to high quality environments, and it's up to us as architects to help deliver that for everyone.
It's not one of the 10 design concepts. Number 11.
I'll add that to the list.
We can have 2 more questions. This gentleman here and that young lady there.
All right. I wonder if you would describe
We can't
for
hear
us.
you.
I wonder if you would describe for us what the Director of Strategic Relationships is.
I'm laughing with my colleague here, Stephanie. So part of my role at HOK is, so HOK has 26 offices globally, and we want to do a better job of connecting with one another and sort of sharing resources. And so because I also have kind of a global role with AIA, and this role is relatively new, it's kind of custom created to help facilitate my AIA presidency. Also a fun fact, the only other HOKer that we know of who was an AIA president was George Kassebaum of the K in HOK, and he was president in 1969. So it's been a while since we've had a president, and so with him being a founder, I think he got more of a pass to do whatever he wanted. However, I needed like a job that would sort of fit with all the responsibilities that come with traveling the country and the world. And so wherever I go, where there's an HOK studio and there's an AIA chapter, which is actually many of them, I will go to the HOK studio, do what we call an Ask Me Anything, so a forum like this where people pepper me with questions about all kinds of things. And I also talk about our HOK Tapestry program, which is our program to specifically partner with women-owned and minority-owned businesses, as well as to just help make business connections. So it's really about strategically partnering in the multiple different sort of ways that the firm can find useful. So that's kind of the long and short. Stephanie, is that more or less as we're kind of building this plane as we fly it? But that's kind of what I do. Yeah. But thanks for the question.
Hi. So since we just discussed like the transfer of resources and how we can make that better between those who do have access to it and not, versus also the money that needs to be put into architectural education, I actually wanted to ask, I am an architecture graduate, still a student at Parsons for my master's, but I'm sitting among a lot of really good architects here who I do recognize, and there is a discrepancy in the sense that there are still areas that those who are less fortunate would know that they have access to resources, but it's not a matter of not having them, but rather a barricade. But there's a lot of people in power who are architects who have the ability to do this because we all have this extensive education. How can we bring, say, for example, the members of AIA, people who, or the members of UIA who have knowledge about this, to bring about change in how these resources are distributed, not just from those who have it to those who don't, but those who already have it to just get access more easily.
Well, it sounds like a question that's more of a suggestion. So it sounds like we need to get you on a committee to to really move that work forward. So let's talk afterwards to get you engaged in the work. But I mean, I'll try to answer the question. That is how this works, though. Like, you ask the question, like, all right, you're now leading this committee. But I mean, I think it is important to open up that engagement and help, just have clear-minded conversations about the resources that people have, where there's a lack of resources, and how to make sure that, those who are in need kind of have access to those folks. And so it's great that, you're coming to, this kind of event, and you can connect with, many of the incredible architects who I'm looking around. I'm really in awe of the work that, I know that you all have been doing and are continuing to do. So, connect with these folks and, just exchange ideas and join
the committee.
Join this committee that we're going to form based on your question.
Well, we have to, as co-chair, I have to thank you very much for coming tonight. We are
there's one more.
Another question?
One more. I think he really wants to ask this question. I hope it's a good one.
Just so you know, we have to be out of here in like 60 seconds.
No, the
literally,
cleaning crew
we
is-
have to be.
Give him the mic, Dave.
I'll try to answer quickly.
It's a pretty simple question. I go to job sites all the time. I have laborers that get paid more than senior architects.
Yes.
And
That's
it's
a
very
problem.
sad. Why there's no unions for architects? It's simple as that.
Okay. That sounds like another committee that we need to form. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kim.